And welcome back to another episode of the Oner podcast, the podcast where we break down and review films all in one big, long, unbroken take. I'm Austin Archer, and with me, as always, is my childhood next-door neighbor and lifelong best friend,
Cramer, England.
All right, here we are. Have we known each other for... We've known each other for longer than 28 years.
Oh, yeah, it's been like, what, 33,
33,
34? Yeah, something like
33 to 34 years.
that.
Yeah, okay. 28 years later, Danny Boyle and Alex Garland back
They're
at
back.
it again. Yeah, okay. So listen, that's the movie we're talking about this week. I'm going to say right at the top of the show here, this movie's in theaters right now. Spoiler alert for this entire episode. We're going to be kind of just getting right into it. So go watch the movie. I'd say it's worth your time. It's worth your money.
Yeah, go see it in the theater. It's a good experience in the theater. So
yeah,
for sure.
And I think this is a fun addition to the 28 something later franchise.
Yeah.
And it feels, and we are sort of beginning a new thing here. A new, I think, trilogy is planned.
Yes.
In this new, kind of 3 decades later world of the infected United Kingdom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So before we even get into the plot, the first thing I just want to say about this film is, this is why I had to say spoiler alert right at the beginning, because I want to start our conversation with what a lot of people are talking about online, which is like the last minute of this movie. Where
last minute is so jarring.
It is like, literally, my girlfriend turned to me at the end and she was like, so just like another movie came and just took over the film for the last minute. I was like, yeah, that's what happened. Like Scott Pilgrim versus the World kind of came in, and like a completely different film. Like
totally tonally completely opposite. Like 180 degrees. But I've got to say, after looking into it more, like I knew, it was very purposeful.
Of course.
But I actually, after thinking about it and after, researching everything, I actually kind of love it.
So what did you find in your research that makes you
okay, so the movie starts out with Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
And then it ends with Jimmy. So it's a bookend. Right. And I thought, what a great way to lead into a sequel. This is just me. What a great way to lead into a sequel where you have the bookend of the movie are kind of unrelated to what is actually happening. But then you don't have to worry about setting up things in the middle too much. It's just kind of like, it's a teaser at the beginning and the end. Now, so I thought, that makes me very interested to see what the next movie is going to be about.
Yeah, and you can let 28 years later, chapter 1 or whatever they're gonna call this, be its own movie, its own journey of Spike going on this journey with his mother and his father, and Spike growing up. But Jimmy is this sort of thing that's there, but the movie doesn't need to be overly concerned with Jimmy. But it's giving us enough of Jimmy to say, there's something. What I kind of like too at the end is that it's like, you think you know this franchise, you think you know the tone of this franchise, you think you know, and at the end of this film, it's like, there's more here. There's more here, and also I feel like a lot of aspects of this film, even just in the body of the film, are telling us there's more going on.
Oh yeah. And the thing that I love too about Jimmy is that his story, I mean, we only get a little piece of it, at the beginning, but it very much relates, even though it doesn't affect the story itself, it very much relates to the story in a different way. So Spike's whole journey is because this movie, which we just touched on a little bit before we started recording, this movie was not what I expected. This movie is a coming of age drama about a 12-year-old kid becoming a man and learning about the world in about like the worst possible way. But it's also extremely beautiful, like in the end. And I was not expecting that at all.
I think I was, just because I think Garland and Boyle always have a tendency to do that. To bring it. I think I was expecting some kind of heart at the core of it.
Yeah. Oh, I was expecting a heart, but I wasn't expecting Spike to be the protagonist.
What a performance, by the way, from,
Yes.
it's one of the best performances from. Now we talked about Adolescence earlier this
Yeah,
year.
yeah,
That
yeah, yeah.
features an amazing
Yeah.
performance from a young actor.
Yeah.
And this movie is the same. It has a leading performance from a very young actor
Yeah.
who has to do a lot, and he holds the film together nicely,
He
really nicely.
Yeah, he really, really does. And so I was not expecting that. If you're expecting that going in, then that's gonna help, I think, knowing that this is a coming of age drama for the most part. But his journey is going from a kid to an adult, like being sheltered from the world and then completely being exposed to it. And that's and then figuring everything out. Now Jimmy is the complete opposite. He had a normal childhood, and then at about age 12 or around that, the world just came crashing down, and he just had obviously this horrible upbringing. And he is a kid who's never really grown up, right? Like, and
He's got
he
like
has
the Lost Boys.
yeah, and he's got a cross on, but it's upside down,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of symbolizing the fact that he could be the Antichrist, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
just a horribly evil figure. So
or
his
or or he's just embraced that, like, God
Right,
has forsaken us here
right,
in the
right, exactly.
yeah.
And that's what's so interesting. It's like, okay, how are they going to go with this character? I'm pretty sure he's going to be bad or an antagonist.
Sure.
Um, but that's also like my theory or my thought is that, okay, Jimmy is going to be the antagonist who's going to take Spike in the next film and kind of try and take him under his wing. And Spike is going to have to figure out everything. But then Jim, Cillian Murphy, is going to come along, and he's going to be the antithesis of Jimmy. So he'll be the good and
Is it
Jimmy will be the bad.
Has it been said that Cillian Murphy will be showing up in this trilogy?
He will, yes. And they said
Wow.
from what I've heard, he is in the second one.
It's cra
So
it's crazy that, like, in my mind, I was like, 28 years later, like, his character, he'd be an old man by then, and then I was like, "Wait, but the
yeah,
first movie came out in, like, what, 2002 or, like,
2003, yeah,
4 2003?"
2003, yeah,
And so it's like, that's almost 30 years. I mean, that's almost,
yeah, yeah.
it's,
It's close enough.
so, like, by the time his
Yeah,
movie comes out, it'll be close to, although
hmm
all he'll have to do is age up 4 or 5 years, and that's
yeah, and that's
so
easy.
it's not that crazy to think that he could still
Yeah,
be out there potentially. If you've got people like Ray Fiennes still out there, that, and you've got,
yeah,
but yeah, I agree. Jimmy's definitely got Negan vibes. Do you know about Negan from the
yeah.
yeah.
Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah. Jimmy's got, like, the kind of vibes of, like, whatever's going on with Jimmy and his gang, you can survive in that gang, but there's
Yeah,
also probably a lot of prices to pay in order to probably a lot of, like, suffering that's involved in living and surviving with that gang.
hmm
Um, but the reason why Jimmy and his gang are so jarring to this film is because
hmm
they really feel like they're shot out of a cannon and shot out of,
yeah.
like, a comic book movie. Like,
Oh yeah,
they
totally.
they arrive at the end of this film and they are, like, supercharged, doing backflips, doing ninja moves, using
Yeah,
nunchucks, and all the, and it just feels like all of a sudden we go from this really grounded, gritty,
yeah,
coming of age drama into, like, it reminded me of, like, the movie Kick-Ass or something,
yeah,
like a
totally.
Matthew
Yeah,
Vaughn movie, or,
yeah,
and it just
yeah.
had a
Guy Ritchie, something. Yeah.
yeah, it just had, like, a fully different energy,
hmm
and people wearing matching tracksuits and, like,
Yeah.
wigs and, like,
Yeah, weird like bobs, like blonde bobs, which this I guess this is in they're referencing I guess Jimmy Savile, I think is how you say his name. He was a British TV actor who worked with kids a lot.
Mhm.
And
He's a
he had this
very known predator.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yes. Known predator, wore the tracksuit, had the same hair, so they're kind of like hinting at that, right? Like these guys they look exactly like him and they're obviously name the Jimmies or whatever, but yeah, anyway, very, very interesting, very jarring.
Well, and I definitely just, like, all I could say for it was, like, well, they're certainly going to, I think, explore more about these people and I think there's a lot of, interesting like, theories that will be going around about what's going on specifically, physiologically with Jimmy and his gang, because
yeah.
there seemed to, I don't know if you got this, but it seemed like they were a little bit supercharged almost. Like they seemed like like I said, they were doing like
Yeah.
acrobatics and backflips and things,
Yeah.
and I kind of thought like, well, maybe they're just really well trained and they're just really good at fighting, or maybe this movie wants to do something with the world building of the virus and say that Jimmy and his gang have found a way to microdose on it in some way that like is safe, but because
Mm.
they introduced this concept of alphas and how
Yeah,
it
yeah.
acts like steroids for them, and it
Yeah.
supercharges them and it turns them into these hulking beasts. So they gave the rage virus this new quality, this new characteristic, and it's like, okay, well,
Mhm.
is there a way, maybe has someone found a way to safely take it in? And
Yeah.
we do this thing with like the baby that comes out of an infected person that's not we're doing things with the established rules of the universe that seem to
Mhm.
break those rules, and or at least evolve them. And
Yes.
so I wondered if there could be something going on with Jimmy and his gang where it's like we're evolving the rules,
Yeah. I
you know.
actually like that. That would be very interesting. That would be something different, something new. So it very well could be that. Or they could just be very well trained and they're kind of crazy. I mean, who knows?
Because
Maybe they found a stash of drugs and they're all on drug, or something
well, the
along
thing
those
that
lines.
it could be that too. Yeah, they could just be on meth. Like they
Yeah.
could,
Yeah. Yeah.
who knows? Or they could meth instead. They've
Yeah. Yeah.
created a
Yeah.
bunch of some kind of cocktail that they take. That,
Yeah.
but what I did notice was one big rule in this universe is you can't get a drop of infected blood and in any open orifice, or
Yeah.
you're instantly infected. This infection takes root fast,
Yes.
and it usually transforms people pretty quickly as far as the
Hmm.
zombie subgenre is concerned. And even there's even a scene earlier in this film where Spike shoots a zombie through the head, and the splatter hits his mom, and he grabs her and wipes her forehead and makes sure
Yes.
that the blood doesn't get in her eye.
Right.
Because we've seen from the very first film, there's a great scene where Brendan Gleeson gets a drop of blood in his eye
Yeah.
and it turns him.
Yeah.
And Jimmy and his gang were like laying waste to this horde of infected with kind of like up close weapons and their bare hands and
Yeah.
blood spraying all over them. And I was like, wait a minute. Either the movie is being really cavalier about its established rules here,
Yes.
or Jimmy and his gang there's something going on with them that,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't be surprised because of how deliberately different they were tonally from everything else we've seen from this universe. So I don't know.
I like that. I think that would be very interesting if they did go down that road. So we'll wait and see. They actually filmed this. They actually filmed the next movie back to back. So it's already in the can.
Oh,
So yeah, it's 28 years later, The Bone Temple.
okay. It
And
definitely felt like
yeah.
one of those things where it's like, oh, this has a very clear direction of where it wants to
Yes.
go next. This
Yes.
isn't like J.J. Abrams handing Luke Skywalker the lightsaber and going, whoever wants to come in next and take
Yeah.
it from
Yeah.
here. It did feel like they were going, oh, we got more for you.
Yep.
Because as jarring as the Jimmy gang is, it
Mhm.
definitely says not only do we have another movie coming, but it's not at all what you think.
Yeah.
Like we've got a whole other thing going on here that, like, I personally don't. I can see why people online, some of them find the ending a lot of, because like you look at the audience score of this
Yes.
movie on Rotten Tomatoes versus the critic
Yeah.
score, and there's a big disparity.
Yes.
And in my theater, people were laughing at this ending. And actually, that's a kind of a problem throughout of the film is the film makes several artistic
Yeah.
decisions that ride the line of like you're
Yeah.
testing. It's like, is this scary or is this funny?
Yeah.
Um, and and I think that some of those stylistic choices, I'm not sure that they work all the way, but I think that this ending took a lot of people all the way out of it. Even if they were with the
Yeah.
movie all the way up till then, this took them out of it in such a jarring. It's like it almost feels like Derek Zoolander and his friends show up at the end, and
That's
like
so true.
like it just feels so different.
Yeah.
But to me, it was saying there's a lot more going on here than meets the eye.
Yeah.
This isn't just another movie hitting the beats of another there's a whole other world here going on with Jimmy. And I do like the way that Jimmy was sort of just an Easter egg throughout the film, that it was like we're seeing little traces of the Jimmy gang, wondering when are we going to meet them. By the time the movie's sort of wrapping up, you're going, oh, I guess we're not going to meet them in this movie. We get to see them at the very end. They're not at all what we could have guessed.
No.
But the world is telling us, we got something in store for you. Come on back and we'll tell you more. And I'm intrigued. Like I'm ready to see more.
Yeah. Oh, I'm totally here for it. I'm very excited for the next film. I also think I totally agree. They were towing the line with some of the scary parts and some of the dramatic parts where some people probably thought it was funny. Now the Jimmy scene, I think it is okay if you find it funny, because I was laughing too, like what the heck is going on? Like what is this? But I almost kind of think they wanted that. Like I think they're fine with you laughing at the Jimmy scene.
Yeah.
Because the song too is like right. And it's, it's like so, like, what the they really want it to be jarring.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that I'm not sure the movie wanted people laughing at, and my theater was laughing. I don't know how your theater responded. And I've seen a lot of discourse about this online, is, as we've mentioned, part of the world expansion in this 3 decades later timeline is there's been sort of a cultural evolution of the infected, and there are now these things called alphas, which are like kind of hulking giant infected that kind of run little gangs of and hordes of infected, and they're sort of in charge. And the thing about the alphas is they have giant long swinging wieners that are very much a part of this film. And I get what Garland and Boyle are doing there, that they're that it's sort of meant to be kind of like a status symbol. It's like this like I'm in charge here.
I'm bigger than you in every way.
Every way. But I do think that I look at it as in the horror genre, to me it's a stylistic choice that could be, and I think, and I don't know that it was for me, but it absolutely could be distracting or cause people to laugh, because sometimes stuff like that, it's like, hey, I get they would be naked. Like I don't think the infected would still be wearing clothes 30 years later. I don't think that you can believably say they would be. And you could do it that way. You could have them wearing kind of like the way that the human beings look in Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. They're wearing loincloths and things like that, and we could buy that. But I also buy that they would be completely naked. I'm like, it's been 3 decades of these of zombies just running around the UK. But every time we see one of these alphas and it's swinging in the wind, I heard people in my audience going like, and it's like, I don't necessarily, I definitely never was afraid of the alpha giant swinging wiener. And I definitely was like, I'm like, I get it. I get like anatomically and physiologically what you're trying to say with that design choice, but like, it's not adding to the dread for me. It's not adding to the fear. I'd say that just the size and the speed of the thing is scarier to me than its giant schwanz. But like this is an episode where we're just gonna have to, like, we can't get around.
No, you can't.
The giant schlongs in this movie. But I like, what did that strike you as a thing that you thought, huh?
Oh yeah, totally. And I definitely heard sniggering, in my theater. I mean, there were only a few people, or maybe like 10 or 15 other people. But I mean, you cannot avoid it. It is right there, and they don't try to hide it for the alphas. Like it's
intentional to be like, look.
I think the first time you see the alpha is much scarier than the second time you see one.
I really like it when it's just in silhouette.
It's
just standing.
He's just standing there, kind of like with the hands in a weird, and they don't show it that much, so it was scarier. The second time you see it, it's played less scary, and it's in the end, because that's when Ray Fiennes shows up, and he shoots it with like, he shoots it with the morphine, and it just kind of like goes docile, right? And it's like sitting there, and it's kind of becomes a joke. He's like, oh, I call this one Samson, like. So I don't know if that one was supposed to be as scary, especially because it happens right by the birth. Like,
but I think every time one of these things shows up, it's like a T-Rex in Jurassic. It's like we got to get out of here. Like,
yeah.
I mean, these things are going around ripping skulls in half and yanking Sub-Zero style from Mortal Kombat, yanking spinal cords out of people. It's like it's scarier than just the average zombie.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it is very distracting. I don't know. I don't know if they intended things to be I don't know if they intended it to be laughed at, but it's also kind of like, if you're gonna show it, people are gonna laugh at it. We're all children at heart.
I know. And it's like we all want to think that we're more mature than that. And we can be like, I get what they're saying here. But I just, it's like, it's one of those things where I'm like, if you did King Kong and you just were like, well, that's King Kong's giant dick, I'd be like, yeah, sure. Why not? But we like, it's just, there's some things for the movie that it's like, in order to help me focus on the film. Maybe that's it, maybe it's just it's an unnecessary distraction that in order to help me stay rooted in what you want me to be feeling, which is just fear of this giant hulking beast, or like the like what Marvel always does with the Hulk is they always have him keep his shirt rips off and his pants rip, but the pants stay on. Realistically, if you're wearing slacks, they're coming off. If you're growing to 10 times the size of your normal body, all of your clothes are ripping off, and we're seeing all of Bruce Banner's anatomy. But if they were to do that, the movie would just be about, can you believe that how much of the Hulk wiener we saw?
I actually think when they render Hulk, I don't think he has anything. It's like a Ken doll down there, because they don't want that. And actually, I think you're right. I think, this was a very deliberate choice that they made, but I think the better choice probably would have been to have them wear loincloths or something. So it just keeps your focus on what's going on, because it is extremely distracting. Like every time I was like, oh, are they going to show it? Oh, there it is.
It just feels like something that like you would see in a Sacha Baron Cohen movie or something. It's just kind of something that like for me, I never laughed at it, but but it was definitely a thing where I was like, well, they really wanted to do that. They wanted to make it clear that that is an aspect of the alpha, and they wanted the audience to just be like, hey, be adults about this. Okay. He would be naked, and we in our world he looks like that. It's like, okay, yeah, I got it, guys, but you can show me like once or twice, and
I would move on. Like we got it. We get the point.
Anyway, so those are kind of like two big things I wanted to that I see in the online discourse. Like a lot of people are calling the movie 28 inches later, and and
oh man, that's okay.
And I see that, and I see the ending being talked about a lot. So I'm like, okay, before we even get into it, those are sort of the things that's like, this is the online discourse. I personally don't feel like either one of those things ruins the film. I still think the film is very strong.
Agreed.
But
it is very strong. It is. And I do think, again, with going into expectations, I think a lot of people's expectations were probably more like mine. I thought it was going to be about a father losing his son and trying to find him, right? And the son, like I thought the son was going to be a big part of it, but I thought Aaron Taylor Johnson was going to be a bigger part. But I mean, having said that, I actually really like the movie that we got. And I think it is extremely layered, and it is, it's extremely symbolic in many, many ways. And I thought they did a really great job with what we do have. But I think a lot of people, they're valid in the things that we talked about. But also I think they're valid, and if you weren't expecting it, you were expecting something else, they might not like it.
Yeah. I think that what we got, all 3 of the films in this franchise so far have aspects to them where they really find, you know, really strong emotional pay
Yeah.
dirt.
Yeah.
The second movie has that whole storyline with the husband who has to abandon his wife at the beginning and
Mhm.
and what's going on with that family, and it
Yeah.
all really, for the most part, works, and really strong emotional performances, and we get that in the first one too. And with Brendan Gleeson and his son, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and all 3 of these films have really strong characters that are believable, really good performances, and
Mhm.
yeah, strong emotional core. Um,
Yeah.
so as we said, we're gonna get into a plot breakdown now. And yeah, spoilers. Um,
Yeah.
we begin this movie with Jimmy. We don't know that yet, but we start
Yeah.
at the beginning. We start, we don't know how many days into the spread of the infection across the UK this is yet, but imagine it's
It's
Killian Murphy's.
probably
Yeah,
within the
Killian.
first few days, yeah.
Yeah, Killian Murphy's probably unconscious in a hospital bed somewhere.
Yeah.
And I like this that we start on Teletubbies and we're watching, and I
Yeah.
like that the movie from the jump is like, hey, you know, it's sort of telling the audience we're gonna go hardcore here because
Yeah.
we start on a room of children who are watching
Oh,
Teletubbies, and the adults are telling them stay in here no matter what, don't come out. And outside in the hall, they can hear this stuff going on, and we know because we know what movie we're watching, what's going
yeah.
on out there. And then sure enough, a horde of infected break into the house and they just lay waste to these little kids that
Yeah.
are, and Jimmy escapes and makes it out, and the other adults in the house are getting thrown around by the
Yeah.
infected, and his mom tells him to run out, to run. He runs out to the church across the street where his father is. And I do think that this opening tonally felt like it matched the ending as a bookend, because his dad, this
Yeah.
moment with his dad is pretty heightened,
Oh, yeah.
you know?
Well, and it's very much not what you expect.
Mhm.
It is very heightened, and, but I think this also tonally fits with the series as a whole,
Yeah.
right? Like, it really throws you in, and Jimmy is it's a horrible, thing that he has to go through. But then his dad is like the priest for the town or whatever. And he is like, he goes to his dad. He's like, Dad, we need help. And then he's like, oh, you don't need to worry. This is Judgment Day, right? Like the dad is like happy.
Yeah.
You can tell the dad is happy, and which is also like completely messed up, right?
Very
Like
disturbing.
very, yeah, like he's like he tells him to take his cross, and he says something like never let go of this or something, like, and then everybody jumps through the glass, in the church, and he's like, yes, yes, my children, right? And like,
Yeah, the dad's just thrilled to be torn apart by this horde of
totally,
infected, which, and again, that's sort of that heightened thing where his dad is
yeah,
having
yeah,
this like religious experience, and it's very, it matches the energy of Jimmy and his gang at the end of the film in a weird
to-
way.
totally.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jimmy
But
hides out underneath, kind of like in a little crevice in the church,
yeah,
has his dad's cross. He makes it out of there, and what we see is just Jimmy running away with this cross, and then we see 28 years later.
yeah,
And I think immediately I assumed, oh, Jimmy's going to be Aaron Taylor Johnson.
that's what I thought for the whole
Right.
movie. I
I think
was
everyone
like,
thought that.
I
I,
was like, oh, his hair changed, but my hair was really blonde when I was
Me
young,
too.
and so yeah, so it was
Yeah.
like that can happen. I was like, I just thought, and his name is Jamie. Aaron Taylor Johnson's character's name is Jamie. So I think I didn't even associate that it wasn't Jimmy.
I
I
think
don't know.
that's done on purpose.
I
I think
agree. I
that
agree.
I think we're meant to,
Yeah.
um, which honestly, the first time that we saw Jimmy written into a body,
Yeah.
I was like, how come Aaron Taylor Johnson? I thought his name was Jimmy. I heard his
Oh yeah.
wife
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
his name earlier,
Yeah.
and I thought that she had said Jimmy. So when I saw that, I was like, how come his son's not
Yeah.
saying, Dad, that's your name?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's because they have Jamie and Jimmy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think that the movie wants us
Yeah.
to assume that
Yeah.
Aaron Taylor Johnson is Jimmy
Yeah.
grown up.
I agree.
But yeah, we cut to 28 years later, and there's what we find out. They sort of give us a recap is that at the end of 28 weeks later,
yeah,
the virus had kind of gone worldwide. It had spread into Europe. There's like these shots of infected running through Paris and running through Rome, and it's sort of the idea is like it's broken out. It's broke. You know, the idea of 28 weeks later is that the American military has come in and set up a successful quarantine in the UK. But the idea of the end of that film is that the quarantine is broken out. But this movie tells us they were actually able to push back the infection back into the UK. And now for the last several decades, the UK has basically been left to fend for itself.
Yeah.
It's
on
just
its own.
been,
Yeah.
like that island has been quarantined and cut off from the rest of the world. And
I think for me, I actually watched 28 weeks later last night. So I had never seen it before.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, it's good. It's good in its own way for sure. But it's like I think they can still work. My easiest way to make it all work is the fact that like, okay, there's a few of them running in different places, and somehow the countries themselves were able to manage it and stop the infection from spreading too far. Right. That's probably the easiest, but so it can work. 28 weeks later can actually be a sequel to or live in the continuity, but you just have to give in to the fact that like the other countries took care of it immediately. So that's kind of like, I'm like, whatever, that's fine. I can believe that.
It does sort of undo what the end of
Yes.
28 weeks later seems to be setting up, which
Yes.
is I was assuming 28 years later would be in a world that has been taken over by.
Yes, but that's what makes it so, in my opinion, this is what makes it so interesting, is that it's still just quarantined to England and Ireland. Like those are the two places that, and the rest of the world has
Scotland.
gone on living.
Yeah.
And so I think it actually is in Ireland. I think it's gone to Ireland as well. Anyway, it's like, but the rest of the world.
Yeah, the rest of the world is basically just acting as though, you know, like they've got electricity and cell phones and internet, and you know, so it's very much so not post-apocalyptic, which is something we find out later, which I thought was interesting. But our main character Spike and his dad Jamie live on an island where for most of the day there is a high tide that covers a causeway that connects them with the mainland. And as you know, for as long as that the high tides and they're sort of protected from the mainland, but when the low tide is in, they can cross this causeway and get over to the mainland to kind of get supplies and hunt and things like that. But they have this sort of self-sustaining village. I was very interested in the culture of this village, especially like the culty aspects, like the masks that people wear, and I wanted to know more about it. Maybe we will find out more about it in this trilogy, but I was interested to know about the theology of this island and what what kind of rituals they do to. There seemed to be some kind of
well, and it is interesting. So it is a real place. It's like Lindisfarne. I'm probably butchering that. That's like what it's called. It's also known as the Holy Island. And I guess it was like a center for Christianity at some point, or some, some religious, I think it's some Christian religion, but so it actually has history in the real world. But like some of the videos I watched on this is, they're very much isolated, which is completely understandable. I think we will get into more of their thoughts and opinions and religious, things that they do. But the thing that was so interesting that I watched is that they believe that like they're very opposed to death, right? Which again is understandable. Nobody wants to die, right? Their whole thing is just they need to keep living. They need to help each other to keep living, and death is the enemy. And they can't, the only way to survive is to continue living. Which is again very understandable. But in the end of the movie, Ray Fiennes' character is the one who says that like you have to embrace death. Like you have to embrace memento mori. Always remember death, but remember that we can die, and the
Yeah.
infected are still people.
Mm-hmm.
But they're, they die just like we die. They are sick,
Yeah.
right? And so the island has this thought of like dehumanizing the enemy, which is something that everybody does, even in wartime with non-infected people, right? It's easier to dehumanize someone so that you can put them down, or that
Mm-hmm.
you can kill them in your, and deal with that in your own mind.
Yeah, Aaron
But
Taylor Johnson says to his son at
yes,
one point, "The infection takes away their soul." Yeah,
yes, yeah. So it makes it easier for them to deal with life, which again is totally understandable. But then Ray Fiennes is there saying, no, we have to accept death, and we have to recognize it as a way of life, which I found very, very interesting. But yeah, I hope it is explored more in the next movie.
Yeah, there did seem to be some kind of Wicker Man-esque
Yes.
cult-like thing going on with the people on this island, but
Yeah.
you've seen islands and communities like this in lots of different post-apocalyptic zombie, whether it's The Last of Us or The Walking Dead, you've
Yep.
seen villages like this. I
Yeah.
will say, in this world, knowing that the world outside of the UK is more or less carrying on,
Mhm.
I was thinking, would it be like you're telling me nobody from the outside world wants to do a humanitarian,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
drop? Like, you don't have to,
Mhm.
you don't even have to land. Just like take a helicopter or a seaplane and do a little goods drop every once in a while to this island. Like
Yeah,
what? Like
yeah,
like obviously there are people doing patrols. There are
yeah,
different European
yeah,
military doing patrols and looking for. And if they see this island and see that it's completely inhabited by people who seem to not be infected and who have been living there for decades, like how hard would it be to just every once in a while
yeah,
send them some food? Like I just was kind of like, really? There's nobody in the world that, and I'm like, you don't need to go there if you feel like, hey, we can't risk, but
yeah,
just
yeah.
drop off some flour and some wheat and maybe even like drop off some gear to let them have internet.
Yeah,
Let them talk
be
to
connected.
people. Yeah,
Yeah,
let them. I just kind of looked at it and was like, I think I think in a world like that, I can totally see why most of the world would say we just can't risk even setting
yeah,
foot
yeah.
on. We just don't know enough about. We just have to keep it sequestered. But I could see how there would be some people who would go, I'm gonna go and do a humanitarian mission and I'm gonna
Yeah.
help these people. I'm
Uh,
gonna yeah.
yeah, I totally agree. I thought the same thing, and I feel like that probably is happening. So they're either going to address it in the next movies, or it'll just be something that like this happens, but we didn't focus on it for the movie. Because I also am like, there's a movie in there where people, you know, escape to the island to try and help people, but then they get infected, whatever.
But
So
also, yeah, it's like Doctors Without Borders, like when they
yeah,
like
exactly.
well, a
Yeah, yeah,
big part of the plot of this film is that the kid wants to go find a doctor, and his dad
yeah.
tells him, he's like, "We don't have any doctors here."
Hmm.
Like all of the doctors died, and we don't have any doctors on our island. I'm
Yeah,
like, you're telling me that in the 8 billion people in the surviving world, there's
hmm,
not a couple hundred doctors who would be willing to put on a hazmat suit and go visit that island once a year and
right.
just be like, "Hey, I'm just gonna come in here and check everybody for,
Hmm,
just make sure
hmm.
everybody's doing all right, bring some
Yeah, yeah,
some medication." I just kind of, it felt a little bit like I was a little bit like, okay, the movie wants me to just accept that the entire outside world has just agreed to completely dismiss.
yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah. That's a big jump. Yeah.
yeah. And I guess you could be cynical and say that's how the world is, but it's like, no, there are people who are trying
No,
to
there,
get
yeah,
into there are
yeah,
people who are trying to get into Gaza right now. Like they
yeah,
want to be
yeah.
there. They want to like give medical aid there. They
Well, and
want to bring,
there's people who go to leper colonies, right? Like I had a cousin
right.
who went and tried to help people who still have leprosy, right? So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
There are people, and in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, there is a part. Someone is doing that. We're just not seeing it.
Hope, but the movie kind of seems to say no. It kind of seems to say
Yeah,
like
yeah, I
this
guess it does.
this
Yeah,
community on this island is fully self-supporting and self
yeah,
sustaining.
yeah,
And everything they have is stuff that they forage from the mainland and
yeah.
stuff
It's
that
true.
they
Yeah,
they get for themselves. And like what the Swiss officer that we meet later in the film says is he's like, anybody who steps foot on this island is officially, you cannot
Yeah.
come back. You're
Yeah.
not allowed.
Yep. Yeah.
And
You're right.
that was an aspect of the film that I was like, if you're gonna tell me that the larger world has managed to push the infection back,
Mm-hmm.
I want to have some kind of connection to the humanity of the survivors, that they care about the people who are
Right.
here, that they're doing that there are, there's drops, there's, humanitarian visits, there's, I don't know, like
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
especially to an island like this. But anyway, um Spike, our main character, and his family, they live on this island. Uh, for in many ways, life there seems pretty peaceful and
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
nice. I liked this whole thing of like, it's a big day for Spike. It's going to be he's 12 years old, and it's going to be his first time going into the mainland with his dad.
Yeah.
I like this thing. It made me think of me and you as kids, where when he's packing his bag to go with his dad, he grabs an action figure and puts it in his
Yeah.
bag. Then he takes it out and looks at it and sets it back
Yeah.
down. And it's sort of like, I'm a man now.
Yes.
I got to leave my toys at home.
Yeah.
And there's a point in every young boy's life where he kind of sets his toys down for the last time.
So true. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought that was a nice little visual detail.
Yeah. I loved it too. It was a Power Ranger, which is like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, man. Yeah. No, it was great symbolism at the very beginning of like, all right, I'm done being a kid. I've got to step into this role of being a man, right? So it was
it's morphin time.
Yeah, it's morphin time. I'm morphin.
It's morphin time. It goes down. His dad's made him a special breakfast because it's his special day with bacon, and that's obviously a rarity. But then we hear his mom, and I kind of like the way that the movie uses whatever's going on with Jodie Comer, who's a great actress.
Yes.
That her disease kind of mimics the rage virus.
Yes.
And showing human rage even without the virus, that something's going on with her. She's sick in the same way that the infected people are sick.
Yeah.
And her sickness makes her kind of physically aggressive and dangerous and difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, her Aaron Taylor Johnson tells her that he's taking Spike to the mainland. She freaks out,
Yeah.
and then Spike has to sort of lie to her to calm her down and tell her that he's going to school.
Yeah.
And that helps her go back to sleep. And Spike and his dad head out to the mainland, and everybody in this town is like, wishing Spike that they all know that today's the day that Spike goes out and becomes a man. And we as the audience aren't really sure if they're going on a goods run or if they're, but it turns out there is a very specific, simple goal of this mission. It's just to get Spike his first kill. They need to get the young boy used to killing. They don't have guns in this village. They use bows and arrows. It's explained to Spike when they get to the gates of the village, like, hey, if you get lost out there, we're not allowed to come get you.
Yeah.
Like
I like that.
I like that.
That's their rule. Like you can always come back, but if you get lost, we're not coming for you. Like that's it. We're, that is the rule, which I thought was good.
Yep.
But they do head out, and it is I love that causeway that they have.
Oh,
right? So
and the sound design in this film, I loved throughout. I thought that the sound design was excellent, and I was so happy that this poem that was in the trailer shows up here.
Yeah.
I think that this poem is so good at establishing dread and just like they're walking across this causeway and this poem starts.
Yeah.
And it starts playing. And the movie does, I want to say at this point in the film is when Danny Boyle starts really, we feel it from the beginning, but he starts really ratcheting up.
Oh yeah.
The style of the film. And once this poem starts, we're doing all of this stuff where we're flashing to like newsreel clips of soldiers marching in World War II. And we're watching even movies about medieval soldiers shooting bows and arrows. And we're seeing, kind of infrared footage of infected stalking a deer at night and eating a deer. And and I love the sort of frenetic, editing of the sound design and I feel like not a lot of directors can pull off this kinetic of an editing style.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and I loved I like the movie started and I immediately felt like, oh, this is Danny Boyle.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels very much like 28 days later. 28 weeks later kind of mimics it, but it's definitely different, which is fine. It's not bad, but like this Danny Boyle really pushes things.
Well,
And
it's
the
got
other
elements of Slumdog Millionaire,
yeah, yeah,
of Train Spotting, that
yeah,
just sort of really kinetic editing
yeah.
style that yeah.
Yeah, he just edits however he wants, which I think is great because it is very much his style and it fits very well for the movie. The other thing that I loved about this movie, which again kind of goes into the expectations, this is a legacy sequel, but it did not do anything that like any of the other legacy sequels do. You know, like, hey, do you remember that? Like from the first movie, like we did it again. Isn't
Right.
that cool? And like this was not like it doesn't even feel like the first movie as far as the story,
Mhm.
because the infected have taken over. There's no outbreak. It's already broken open. Like it's there. So it's just them surviving. And so this story of a young kid having it be a coming of age story is just completely different, but it feels so similar to 28 Days Later in the tone, in the editing, in so many other ways. So it was great to not have it be fall into all the tropes that all the legacy sequels do.
Well, one thing that's nice about this entire franchise is every single one of the films is very much so its own movie.
Yes.
And none of them really are like feel the need to be super connected to each other
Yeah.
outside of the fact that they exist in the same world where this rage virus has kind of
Right.
had a huge effect. But
Yeah.
they're all very much so their own. None of them are a continuation of the story from the movie before. It's all every movie has its own characters and its own story,
Mhm.
and that's not very often that you see a franchise like that, where every
Yeah.
installment is its own thing. And again, going back to Jimmy and his gang, I think that we can expect with the next film that it's going to be more of the same of that, where it's like that's going
Yeah.
to be its own film with it has a different director.
Mhm.
I think stylistically it'll feel different. I will say one thing I missed in this film is I missed elements of the score from the first two films
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's such a strong score. It's such
Yes.
it's kind of an iconic score at this
Yeah.
point, and they don't bring it back at all.
No.
And I sort of like with Gladiator 2 when we were like, I missed
Yeah.
the music. You know, that's one element where I'm like, I wish that would have shown up at least once in the
Yeah.
film. That being said, the music that they did have in this movie and the way that they use sound in this movie, I found incredibly effective. Uh,
Absolutely. I actually
yeah,
really liked it, but I agree. Yeah, it would have been that one main song that they have is great. So yeah.
yeah. So they get over to the mainland, and yeah, the idea of this trip is just to get Spike his first kill. Pretty early on, we see the evolution that's sort of taken place with the infected from the last time that we've been here. One
Yeah.
big one is that there's these different kinds. Like there's this one kind that's almost like slugs,
Yeah.
like, and they're
Yeah.
just kind of like fat and they're covered in sores and they just sort of crawl around.
Yep.
And there's like little baby versions of them, and and uh the dad sort of explain Aaron Taylor Johnson sort of explains to Spike like, oh, you know, those are the slow ones, but
Yeah.
that there could be some runners in the
Mhm.
trees, which I even like that line of like, oh, do we have infected climbing trees in this
Mhm.
movie? And I kind of wish that the movie would have paid that off later on, that we would have
Yeah.
seen and
Yeah.
some, because that would have been crazy if you all of a sudden started seeing them jumping out of trees and stuff, because this
Yeah.
was one of those movies that broke a big genre rule in the zombie genre by having fast zombies. It was one of the
Right.
first
Right.
times we ever saw that.
Yep.
And so to up the ante and go, now they're climbing trees and but I think the way that they up the ante was by giving them different categories now, sort of the way
Yeah.
that The Last of Us has, where there's different sort
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
there's like stalkers and there's clickers and there's the big hulking ones and but yeah, we come across these sort of slow crawling, like fat ones,
Yep.
and
Yep.
it's a good way for Spike to get his first kill. We see how difficult it is for him, but he gets the job done.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, and he is scared and he doesn't, he's trying to show that he's not scared, but he does kill the dad, I guess. And then the mom is kind of coming up on the side of them and Aaron Taylor Johnson kills the mom and then they almost kill like one of the baby ones, but Spike tells his dad no, like, don't know, like, and they let it go, which was interesting, right? But
it is interesting because it's just like, oh, like there's
yeah,
this movie seems to be wanting to do a lot with like
yeah,
respecting the infected as people who just
yeah,
happen to be sick.
yeah,
But who still have their essential humanity, and asking that question, which I think is interesting.
yeah.
But yeah, on this trip, obviously things kind of go sideways. At some point they find a whole herd of deer that's kind of stampeding,
Mhm.
and they're watching that. I found this visual effect to be a little undercooked. I don't know how you felt. Like this stampede of deer, I was
Right.
like, this looks like the 1993 stampede in Jurassic Park.
Jurassic
Like it
Park.
looks a little dated, and maybe
Yeah,
that's where you see the limitations of shooting a movie on iPhone
yeah,
and
yeah,
trying to. I don't know. This movie doesn't
yeah,
have a ton of digital effects, but this was one of them that I
yeah,
thought looked oddly. Uh,
yeah. Out of place.
yeah,
Yeah,
but yeah, while they're out in this kind of open field, they see one sort of faster one, and I think that they kill it, and I can't remember if Aaron Taylor Johnson gets it or if Spike gets it, but
mhm.
they're like, oh yeah, and then they see the Alpha approach
Well,
over.
and do they go into the house first? They go into the house first, I think,
I thought
right?
that they ran from them into the house, right? Or maybe that is. You're right. They go into the house, and there's one hanging,
Yeah,
and yeah, and there's a dead body hanging upside down, and
yeah,
it has the name Jimmy carved into its chest.
yeah,
And Aaron Taylor Johnson says, someone's trying to send a message here with this.
yeah,
And Spike's like, what's the message? And he goes, I don't know, maybe go away, or just I don't
yeah.
know, like,
Yeah, there's
but
he's like, "There's some weird people out here,"
yeah.
and so
But he
yeah,
says, "This is a lesson for you." And he's like, "What's the lesson?" And he goes, "Well, the lesson is, you get to kill again. Like,
yeah,
you've got to
yeah,
get used to killing. It gets easier the more
yeah,
you do it. So
yep,
shoot this. Somebody left him here to be infected. He's infected now." And this is where Aaron Taylor Johnson tells him, "Don't worry. The virus takes away his mind." But Spike freezes here, and he can't. Which
yeah,
it's one of these moments that's frustrating because the infected person is swinging and shaking, and they break free, and Aaron Taylor Johnson has to step in and shoot him
Now
with a bow and arrow.
does Aaron Taylor Johnson shoot him, or was it Spike? Because I couldn't really tell, and it might have just been
I think maybe it is Spike. I can't remember, but I
yeah,
think that the noise is what
yeah,
kind of alerts the others to their whereabouts, and they have a little chase through the woods, and they go out into this clearing, and that's where they see the Alpha, and then they
that's it,
get
yeah,
chased by a whole horde. But I like, yeah, the first appearance of this Alpha, and it's just
yeah,
standing in silhouette,
and
and
you
it
can
looks.
see how much bigger he is than all the other ones.
Yeah, and it looks very different from anything we've seen from the franchise so far.
Yeah,
We can see that there's something else going on. And also, we were sort of introduced to the idea of this being a thing earlier on. They came across the dead carcass of a deer that the Alpha and the other runners had killed, and the head of the deer had been ripped off, and its spine is
yeah,
hanging and had been set in a tree. So
yeah,
Aaron Taylor Johnson knows that's probably an Alpha that did that. But
yeah,
this is where he confirms to his son, "Oh no, Alpha," and he explains to his son, "There's some of them that are bigger than the others, and they're
yeah,
faster. They're harder to take down. We'd have to shoot them with 5 to 10 arrows straight in the
yeah,
head to probably take them down." And they wind up having to hide out in the attic of this house, which is Jimmy's house from
yeah,
the beginning of the film.
mhm.
And I
Oh,
kind of
was that
like,
his house? Like,
yeah, it's
oh,
the
okay,
exact same
okay.
layout as the house from the beginning of the film.
Oh, I
Same
didn't realize
doors.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
same, yeah. So, and there's a nice little action sequence here of them like trying to get into the attic, and the infected are running up the stairs, and he's having to shoot him with his bow and arrow while he's trying to help his son into the,
yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah, it was good.
and I really like Danny Boyle's stylistic choice of when arrows hit infected. It's almost like a snapshot happens, like
Yeah,
the way that they edit this of
yeah,
I
and it's like bullet time. They actually do the switch, like,
yeah.
they do an effect on that, yeah.
I feel like the way that Danny Boyle chooses to edit these films is intentionally messy and ugly, and I like it.
Yeah, yeah,
I
I do too.
like that he's giving the film, and I think again, a lot of people could do this and it could be really hard to watch, but I think the way he does it feels very artistically
Yeah,
right
mhm,
and thematically right. But yeah, they wind up hiding out throughout the night in the attic, and I kind of like this sort of standoff between Aaron Taylor Johnson and the Alpha as they're staring at each other, you know, and that the Alpha will just wait. Spike notices a fire off in the southwest of the island, asks his dad what it is, and his dad says, I don't know what that is. And it seems like his dad's lying. And then the stampede comes back of the deer, and it shakes the house and it wakes them up, and they have to get out of the house because the house is collapsing. But now they're out in the open, and it's basically like a dead sprint. They got to run back to the causeway because you know, it's going to be low tide enough that it'll be like shin deep water, and they're just going to have to run for it. And this was a great sequence of the Alpha shows up when they get to the causeway and chases them down this thing. And the
way he runs is like, it's like a perfect form. And he just like, he hauls, and they're already like, I don't know, they're like 3/4 of the way through, but he's actually gaining on them. And this was really, really scary because they get to the gate, and they're like, let us in. And like, no, you know, like, they're able to shoot the Alpha. They have a watchtower and they're shooting him, but he's not stopping. Like, he just keeps going. And they're like, let us in. Like, look at our eyes. We're fine. We're not infected, you know? And they keep telling him to wait. And then they do shoot the Alpha with like this huge arrow that's like on fire. And that seems to do it for him. I guess they killed him, right? But
it seemed like it. I think that one's dead. I think they got him. But it was a very intense sequence. But yeah, there's been this they finally let him in, and there's been this whole party planned for Spike, and the whole town has been, you know, and this is where we sort of see some of the cult aspects of it. Like when they're preparing this party for him, there's someone that's standing with this mask on that's like, and it seems like there's some kind of ritual that they do after someone gets their first kill, and it has, you know, but they have this big party. Aaron Taylor Johnson's telling everybody in the town about Spike, the hero and the killer, and Spike feels a little bit like his dad's misrepresenting you know, him and making him out to seem like more of a hero than he is. Spike drinks you know, beer with the other people in the town, gets a little drunk, and he finds his dad out canoodling and hooking up with another woman in town. And this is sort of, you know, it's just one of those, this is sort of becomes what this movie is about, is this kid realizing that his dad is not the guy he maybe thought he was. And I don't think that it's the Aaron Taylor Johnson's like necessarily a terrible or bad person. He's dealing with a really difficult situation. He's got a wife who's dying of an illness that nobody understands. She's, you know,
he's not a horrible person. He is doing a horrible thing. Like, you know, your wife is dying and you're off doing this. Like, that's obviously not right.
No,
but it does. He's not presented as a bad father. He's actually presented as a pretty good father. Spike does really look up to him and really does love him, which was also, I bumped on this a little bit because right after this, like, Spike really turns on his dad. Which it's not the biggest deal. Like, I still really like the movie, but I was like, that's pretty quick. Like, and his dad slaps him in the face. You know, Aaron Taylor Johnson slaps him, and it was like,
I gotta say, if I was 12 and I caught my dad cheating on my mom, I probably would be furious. And if my mom was like dying of cancer, and I caught my dad and I walked in on my dad cheating on I think I might never forgive him. I think
true.
It'd be like an earth shattering thing.
I think it was just like, I think it was not so much what happened and how it happened, it's just how quick it happened. Like, it's really like one or two scenes that it kind of like completely turns. And again, like, I forgive it for it. It's not the biggest deal, but it was kind of like he like went from really loving his dad to really not loving him. But it is, like you said, honestly, that's a pretty jarring situation. So not the biggest deal.
He confronts his dad about the fire. He says, hey, I think you're lying. I think you've been lying to me about, I think you know what that fire is, and I think you know what's wrong with mom. And
well, and he found out what the fire was. He said that because he talked
to this other guy,
some family friend, and he's like, oh, he's a doctor. And he, there's a doctor there, and he does that. And so,
but so he confronts his dad. He's like, hey, but and then his dad tells him, he's like, listen, that guy's been insane for a very long time. And his dad tells him, I saw him once. And he explains to them this story of how when he was younger, they were out on the mainland hunting, and they ran into the stench of death, and they walked over this hill, and they found the just a whole field of bodies lined up in rows, and we get to see
Yeah.
this image of this doctor kind of wearing like scrubs, and he's got a medical mask on, and he's just throwing bodies into this giant fire. And he just very casually waves to them and waves to them to come over, and they don't. And
Mhm.
that's who that doctor is. And but it makes it look like he's just gone completely crazy. We come to find out later that that's not really the case. He's just trying to treat
Yeah.
bodies with some kind of reverence and give
Yeah.
them some kind of, but which I really come to like this. But
Yeah.
Spike decides, I'm out of here. I'm going to take my mom
Yep.
to this doctor because she's
Yeah.
sick and he can help her.
Well,
And
and
he,
he
yeah,
does not even know what cancer is, right?
you're
And
right. Of
they
course.
nobody really knows what is wrong with her. I thought it was a tumor in her brain, which I mean, I
Sure.
guess it kind of could have been. But anyway, he just wants the doctor. That's all he
Yeah.
wants is to help his mom.
Yep.
And this is real. This happens at the midpoint.
Yeah.
This is like his new direction. He takes his mom to find her a cure.
Yeah, he fakes a fire, or he doesn't
Yeah.
fake a fire. He starts a fire in the village so
Yeah.
that he can distract the people who are watching the gates, and he gets his mom out of the
Mhm.
village and walks her across back to the mainland. And so, we know, I mean, we're filled with dread. Like he's walking a woman who's kind of in and out of reality, and this is going to
Yeah.
be a really hard thing to pull off. And yeah, Spike and his mom basically just have the second half of the film
Yeah.
to do this journey to go find this doctor.
Yeah.
And yeah, we at some point were introduced to a bunch of soldiers who,
Yeah.
we were introduced earlier to there's patrols that go around the island, but now we see a bunch of soldiers. We have a nice little action sequence where they run into these tunnels, and
Yeah.
they are confronted by an alpha, and the alpha rips one of their spines out,
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
only one of them escapes. And
Yeah.
later on, Spike and his mom, they're running from a horde of fast zombies,
Mhm.
and they run into this Shell gas station. And I like this, that the
Yeah.
S fell off and it says hell,
Hell,
and
yeah.
that's
That was
fun.
cool.
But
Yeah.
there's like gas in there, and it's
Yeah.
very clear. They go in there and they can't really breathe, and they're trying to keep the infected out. And this soldier opens up this door and shoots down into the
Mhm.
gas station. When he shoots down, it lights everything on fire. And I guess it was Byzantine or something, or
Yeah, some slow
benzene,
leak. Yeah.
benzene,
Some
benzene.
some gas that, yeah, has just leaked into the entire inside of the building, and, yeah, he shoots and it blows up, and and they are low to the ground, so the infected get it, they get caught on fire, so they're saved, and now they're with Eric. Eric, he's
Yeah.
Swedish.
Byzantine is an empire, by the way. It was the Byzantine Empire. I don't know
Yeah.
why I said that instead of benzene, but
Benzene, hey,
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
It all
So, yeah,
works.
and so they've got a helper who's got a big gun, and he's got, he is telling Spike all about the outside world. And this is kind
Yeah.
of a fun sequence where he decides to join their team, and he carries Jodie Comer for a
Yeah.
good amount of the way.
Yeah.
And I like this. At one point they're like hanging out on having like almost like a picnic at a field, and Jodie Comer gets up and starts walking, and he's like, "Wait, she can walk?"
Yeah.
And like he's been like carrying her. But
Yeah.
also he shows Spike what an iPhone is, and
Yeah.
and I like this little sequence where Spike looks at Eric's girlfriend, and he's like, "What's wrong with her face?" Because she's got plastic surgery, and he's like, why do her lips look like that?" And
Yeah.
he thinks that she's had like an allergic reaction to something,
Yeah.
or
That
which is,
was that was great. Yeah.
yeah, and that's funny. But then the guy's phone dies, but he sort of explains to us and to Spike that the rest of the outside world, they have the internet, they have,
Yeah.
they've got delivery services, just everything's basically working the same as it is in our world. They've just basically cut off
Yeah.
the UK.
Yeah.
And so yeah, they're now moving along with Eric, and they come across a train. And this is one of those sequences in a horror movie where like you can hear someone screaming from
Yeah.
inside the train. And I immediately am like, just don't go in there, please.
Yeah.
Don't go in the
Well,
train.
yeah.
But
And I mean, right before this, you see a bunch of zombies in a river, and you see a bunch of infected that are in the
yeah,
river, and you see one that is very visibly pregnant, and
yeah.
she's walking around.
And
And
my
then,
mind went, was she pregnant when she got
yes,
infected like 28 years ago, and you just stay pregnant? Because I don't, and then or is the alpha impregnating people because
yeah.
they're up, and that's another big thing is they
Well,
keep showing us
Yeah.
these alpha schlongs, and it's like,
Yeah.
you
That
know,
and I had wondered that as well. My thought is because she is wearing clothes.
yeah.
My thought is she was pregnant, she got infected somehow, she's in some community. She got infected after she was pregnant, and
So maybe she was like in Jimmy's community.
right,
She
right,
gets, or some
right.
community like
Sh
that.
Yeah,
She gets.
she still has clothes, and, like, it seems like that's my thought, it's more of like a Blade situation where
You don't
she
think
was
that the
already
alpha
pregnant.
was
I don't
impregnating?
I'm not saying that that's not a possibility,
Because it
'cause
feels
that
like
could
to
be a
me, like,
possibility.
why make, because the alpha's the
Yeah,
one who
yeah,
shows up here almost like to
yeah,
be like, "That's my baby."
yeah, yeah,
You know?
and
I don't, but you could be right. Yeah.
I think it's one of those 2.
And this
I think it's one of
definitely
those 2.
seems like another rule break of the universe where it's like any drop of blood infects you in this world, but the baby who shares the mother's DNA, I guess what we get, the explanation we get from Ray Fiennes later on is the magic of
The
the
magic of the
placenta,
placenta, yeah.
you know?
Which,
And
yeah,
like,
is very I mean, it is pretty
because
crazy
this
how
baby, so yeah, Jodie Comer helps this infected woman deliver this
yeah,
baby,
yeah,
and it seems to be a healthy baby.
yeah,
And then as soon as she helps this woman deliver this baby, the woman starts getting angry again, like she's gonna attack them, and Eric comes in and lights her up with his machine gun. But
yeah,
then he's telling um Spike and Spike's mom, like, "Hey, you put that baby down, or I'm gonna
yeah,
kill all three of you. You
yeah,
put it down, or I'm gonna," And as he's doing this, he's backing up, and sure enough, our alpha boy reaches down, grabs Spike or whatever his name is, Eric by the
yeah, Eric,
head,
yeah,
yanks him out of this train, and gives him the old Sub-Zero treatment.
yep,
Uh,
and
you
then he
know,
jumps down, and
yeah.
he's like he comes towards them, but then he, like, grabs the woman, which again does make it does make you think like, "Oh, is this his, like, one of his women
That's
that he
what I
has?"
got
So,
from it,
yeah, and I think it's probably more likely that,
but
but anyway,
but maybe
who knows?
then that maybe this is just a question for the next film.
I think it is, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And anyway, they have this chase scene out down the train. This alpha,
mhm,
this is probably our biggest look at the alpha schlong as he's running down this
yeah,
train,
yeah, yeah,
But they get off the train and they run out into the field, and Spike's shooting him with arrows and trying to take him down, but then out comes Ray Fiennes and he blows a dart at this guy, and
yeah,
it puts him down. I will say this, in my mind, once this has happened, I just don't know why either time this guy shows up and Ray Fiennes is able, and they're able to put him down with one of
yeah,
these, methadone darts or whatever they
yeah,
have, morphine darts or whatever it is.
yeah, yeah.
Why are we not taking out our knife and stabbing him in the brain? Just like as soon as he is
Yeah,
docile,
yeah,
just give him a good stab in the brain, one or two or three of
yeah,
those, and let's just put him down.
yeah.
Let's just,
I understand why Ray Fiennes doesn't,
right,
because he sees them as people, right?
right.
But yeah, if I was Spike, I'd probably shoot him in the head with some arrows, like,
Yeah, I'm
because
just,
I agree, I agree.
well, but if I were Ray Fiennes, even like Ray Fiennes understands the necessity later on of putting people down, and
True,
like in a
true.
humane way. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
hey,
yeah,
like if you're able to incapacitate Samson, put him down. Like
yeah,
let's, and maybe the idea is like if you were to stab Samson in the head, since he's an alpha, he wouldn't die right away, and that could wake him up, and he
yeah.
could
That's
like,
true. Yeah, yeah, that sounds good.
but I
Yeah,
still think like, hey, let's dose him several times. Let's make sure he's under, and let's
yeah.
just
Make
make
sure he's
sure that
gone.
he's
Yeah.
gone. But anyway, this is when Ray Fiennes comes into this movie, and God bless Ray Fiennes. He
I
just
don't know.
elevates everything he's in.
I just don't know how he's so good.
He's
Like,
the best.
he is like this character from the trailer. I thought he was going to be mad. Like, I thought he
Yeah,
was going to be crazy, but he is like somehow he makes this character work, and he does it in such a beautiful way.
I think
Like,
he's the best part of the whole movie. Like
I
he's just,
agree. I
yeah,
agree. He
he's
like
just
he's like
he
happy, and he's like, "Oh, hi, how are you?" Like, he's like he's very jovial, and he's very like lighthearted, and like
he
it
paint
somehow works.
paints his whole body in iodine because
Yeah,
apparently the virus hates iodine, which is a nice thing to know.
I thought
That's a
that was
nice little
interesting. Yeah,
thing to nice development.
yeah,
But yeah, he's the doctor, and he takes them back to his camp, where and we've this is on all of the promotional material, and I
yeah,
love the reversal of what this is, because in the promotional material, this looks like we are in some sort of like from the trailers, when you see this giant stack of
Yeah.
skulls and you
Yeah.
see this kind of temple of bones, you think this is going to be like some scary post-apocalyptic
Yeah.
apocalyptic death cult. You know,
Yeah.
all of the posters have this stack of skulls and it looks really intimidating. But then in the context of the film, it's actually just this really beautiful thing.
It
It's like
is.
Ray Fiennes has taken the bones of when he was laying people out earlier in the film, when Aaron Taylor Johnson talked about him, he's been boiling people's skin away and taking their
Yeah.
bones and making basically memorials to them.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
been making like this giant, beautiful memorial to the dead. And
Yeah.
he's got this giant stack of skulls, but I love the speech that he gives where he says every one of these had a brain inside of it that thought
Yeah.
its own thoughts and that saw things and that experienced things and that thought and had people it loved. And he's like,
Yeah.
so every one of these faces saw the world, you know, and it's so his character is just like so beautiful,
Yeah.
and Ray Fiennes imbues him with such humanity and depth, and yeah.
Yeah, and he says, because Spike says, "What is that?" And
Mhm.
Ray finds this is kind of when it started. He says, "I've been waiting 13 years for somebody to ask me that," which
He
just
said,
complete.
I thought I would die before I ever got to answer the
Yeah,
question."
and it
Yeah.
just like totally sets the tone for his character, and it does like this is really much a very sacred place to him,
Mhm.
and it's also like wow, like it really does kind of shift your perspective in the
Yeah.
movie to like be like wow, okay, and there is actually a church that is inside of it has a ton of bones in it, and I actually got to visit it a few years back. It's called the Sedlec Ossuary. It's in the
Mm.
Czech Republic, and inside there is a chandelier made of human bones,
Wow.
and there's a lot of skulls in there, and there's a lot of different ornate structures made from human bones. And you know, you hear about it, you see it, you think, "Oh my gosh, that's so creepy." But like we went there, and it is like it's kind of crazy because they are human bones, but it is a very sacred place. And like you go there and you really kind of have an appreciation for the because people will donate their
Yeah.
bones to go into this church, right?
Yeah,
And
of course.
it's like, wow.
I'd like to be a part of something like that,
Yeah, like
you
it's
know?
really cool. So like when I went there, I was like, wow, this is really spiritual, right? Like it's a really spiritual place. And so I'm sure that they took inspiration from that
Sure.
actual church. But
Sure.
this whole area, the you know, the bone temple,
Mhm.
is really beautiful. And it actually is it's a really pretty amazing sequence that they have in
And
this part.
this whole kind of section of the film is another big tonal shift because this whole movie's been
Yeah.
kind of an action, horror,
Yeah.
thriller, and then we get here and we feel this sort of sense of safety and peace with Ray Fiennes. Like
Yeah.
if he's managed to survive here by himself for 28 years
Yeah.
and you know, he must be pretty good at, you know, like detecting when they're under threat but
Yep.
I like that he takes Eric's skull and he goes, "Do you mind if I take him?" And we get to see the process that he's built
Yeah.
for boiling down the skin, and it's pretty graphic. Like he's like
Yeah.
scraping the skin off of this thing, but
Yeah.
then he just very gently he just hands it to Spike and he says, "Why don't you go find him a good place?" You
Yeah.
know, and Spike goes and finds Eric a nice resting place in the pile of skulls, and it's like very sweet, you
Yeah.
know. But
Yeah.
then Spike and then so and I like this. The doctor says, "I imagine you're here for the baby," and he goes, "No, I actually we just found her." And he's like, "I'm
Yeah.
here for my mom," and he goes, I was hoping you could figure out what's wrong with my mom."
Yeah.
And basically, the long story short is that, you know, he doesn't have any, he obviously doesn't have an MRI, you know, an
Yeah.
MRI or a CAT scan. He doesn't really have sophisticated tools, but based on what he can do, the tests that he can do with Jodie Comer, he deduces that she has some form of cancer that is metastasized into her brain and
Yep.
that she probably only has weeks to months left to live and that it's going to be quite a painful journey for her.
Yeah.
And Jodie Comer decides in a moment of lucidity with the
Yeah.
doctor, will you please just put me down,
Yeah.
so that my son doesn't have to A, get me back to the village, you know, and deal
Yeah.
with me, and B, you know, so I don't have to suffer. And
Yeah.
Ray Fiennes has this gorgeous monologue where what they do first is they sedate Spike.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you felt I almost thought, are they gonna kill Spike too? Like, are
Oh,
they gonna like I
I
felt like, are
didn't
they
think that. Yeah,
but I like they sedate Spike so that they can just sort of explain to him calmly what's happening.
yeah,
And I thought this was so beautiful that Ray Fiennes is explaining to him like everyone dies and there's all different kinds of deaths,
yeah,
and some deaths are really long and painful and drawn out, and some people are lucky enough to die surrounded by their loved ones and to go and love and go, and he's like, so you have an opportunity here. He's like, do you love your mom? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, she loves you, and we have an opportunity to just send her away with love.
mhm,
And so she gives him the baby, and then they just this whole sequence was so well done and so
yeah,
well executed. And Ray Fiennes kind of takes her away gently, and it's very much like how doctors actually operate in hospitals, where they'll sometimes tell a family like, hey, we this person has a advanced directive that they would like to not be kept alive by machines, so what we can do is we can give them a morphine drip and make them very comfortable, and we can just help them ease, and it's like
right,
this very soft, humane, compassionate thing that he does for Spike
mhm,
and his mother. And when he comes back, he's got a new skull, and he hands it to Spike, and he says, go find her a nice place.
yeah,
And Spike climbs to the top of the bone tower and puts his mom's skull, and he has it looking at the sunrise. And
yeah,
yeah, and it's just beautiful. It's such a beautifully executed sequence. And then Samson comes back, and he
yeah. This was
yeah,
it was an absolutely beautiful sequence, like,
yeah.
and treated it very, very well, I think, in the
Mhm.
movie. Um, and then this part, yeah, like this part was weird for me because you have this whole sequence, and then like they're running and they go into this little cave, and Samson is like trying to kill him. It just felt so out of nowhere.
Right.
Um, and I just didn't see any like connection to the two. But I mean, whatever. It just seemed to like all of a sudden be they were running and they get in this little hole, and he's got like a cage that they can't that Samson can't get into, but then he breaks through, and he's got the doctor, and he's pulling him up, and he's trying to like rip off his head, and Spike is able to grab one of the morphine darts and put it in his arm, and Ray Fiennes says thank you, and
And he's like, I think you better go home now, Spike.
yeah, yeah.
But also again, I was like, and let's kill Samson, please.
Yeah, look,
Like
he just
before
tried
he
to kill
leaves,
you.
can we please kill Samson? Can we please just before he leaves, can we just stab Samson in the head several times, please?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
just let me do you this favor. Let me cut Samson's head off for you, and just
yeah,
you can put Samson's skull on the pile, and
yeah,
but anyway, what what Spike does, which is kind of surprising, is he makes it all the way back to the village with the baby. He
yeah,
gets there by low tide, crosses the thing, but he leaves the baby in a basket with a note for his dad.
yeah,
And he says, I'm going to go back to the island, and I'm going to just go, I'm
yeah,
going to go make my own way. And it's sort of Spike growing into a man and saying, I'm going to
yeah,
go, don't come looking for me. And Aaron Taylor Johnson tries to go after him, but the tide's too high.
mhm,
And basically we sort of linger on this image of Spike on the island by himself. He's cooking up a fish, but down the road here comes some infected. So he gets out
yeah,
his bow and arrow, shoots one of them, but then a whole bunch of a horde's coming down. So I thought the movie was going to end here. I thought it was just going to sort of be
yeah,
like
yeah,
Spike shooting the infected and taking off and running, and then we'll pick back up. But Spike gets to this rock wall, and as this gang of infected is coming down on top of him,
yeah,
he shoots one of them through the head, and then we hear someone go, nice shot. And he
yeah,
looks up, and here is Jimmy
yeah,
with his gang. And like, we've seen, I think there's a couple other moments earlier in the film where like we see things that are painted on the side of buildings, and like Jimmy's name is scrawled
yeah,
over it and stuff. And here's Jimmy and his gang. And like we said, they are just shot out of a completely different movie, completely
yeah,
different style. And they jump down and they kill this horde of zombies. And then Jimmy says, I'm Jimmy, let's be pals. And that's the end of our film.
yeah,
And yeah.
yeah,
And he, and so it's clearly setting up a whole other
yeah,
universe of a different tone, a different
yep,
style. I'm very interested to see what this next movie looks like and feels
yeah,
like. Um, But yeah, it is, there's a lot that happens in the last 20, 30 minutes of this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it does seem like it's going to, it's a very memorable ending.
Yeah.
And I am very interested to see what happens in the next one. And
yeah.
But yeah, it is also very, very jarring because it is so different than the rest of the movie. But
so let's see how that affects our scores. This was an interesting one to do. If you've never seen our podcast before, we give scores for films out of 10, 10 being the best. We give a score for technical rating, just how well the film was constructed at a technical level, the craft of the film, the nuts and bolts, the writing, the acting, the sound design, the visual effects, the cinematography, all of that stuff. We give a score for the ending. How well did the film stick the landing? We give a score for rewatchability. How likely are you to rewatch the film? How well do you think it would go down on a rewatch? We give a score for cultural impact and significance, and we give a subjective rating. Just how well did we how much did we subjectively enjoy the film? So Cramer, what is your technical rating for 28 years later?
My technical rating is an 8. I mean, the film was shot on an iPhone, but it is
several iPhones.
several iPhones. And they didn't just pull it out of their pocket. They had
with
a lot
world-class lens packages.
DPs and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it fits so well with the aesthetic of 28 Days Later because that was one of the first films to shoot on digital, and they really leaned into the look. Like they leaned into that like not high quality look, and somehow that just works really, really well for that film. And this one kind of had that same feel. Like they could have shot it on really, really nice cameras and had it look really crisp and clear and still kind of added something. But I liked that technical aspect of it. I loved the craziness of the editing. I looking back on the script, I love the symbolism that's in the script and the deeper meaning that's in the script. And Alex Garland, as we talked about, like he's one that for me, every time I watch his movies, I'm always a little bit like, man, like I'm not sure how I feel about it. But then as I think about it more and more and more, and I learn more and more about it, like he is a very talented filmmaker, like, and he knows what he's doing. And I love what he has to say in a lot of his movies. So I think, I mean, I guess I could go higher, but I also like, there were definitely some parts that were jarring. The the bullet time that they used was a little weird and also felt like a little out of place. Like, but it's also Danny Boyle, so whatever. But it's a really great movie, technically, for sure. So
I gave it an 8 as well. Very similar to you. The way I feel about it is, for the most part, this film is executed very well at a technical level. I think that the script mostly works. I think that the performances all work. I didn't ever really have a problem with any of the performances in this film. I felt like everything was pretty great, especially Ray Fiennes. God, I love that guy. Jodie Comer's great here. An amazing lead performance from the kid who plays Spike. Love the sound design, love the use of sound in this film, love the kinetic editing style, and the execution of that. Where I dock this movie technical points is just some of the stuff that they're asking me to suspend disbelief on that I just don't, I just don't know why there wouldn't be supply drops for an island of entirely I don't know why the larger world in 30 years wouldn't be interested in this island that is full of entirely uninfected people. Like, why there wouldn't be doctors that would be interested in, there's just some of that stuff where I'm like, really? No one's going to go help them? And I just have to go, okay, I'm not, I don't know if I agree or disagree yet with the alpha schlongs. I don't like, that's a thing where I'm just like, I don't know if it's distracting and takes me out of it. I don't know if it's the wrong aesthetic choice for the film. I don't know if it strays into the film being tonally funny or jarring in a way that is not good for the film. I don't know. I get what's being done there. I like the idea of there being bigger, jacked, infected. I also it's just my personal preference. I don't really like them being called alphas. I don't like I don't like reinforcing the alpha narrative, which is also a thing that's been largely debunked in nature. This idea that there's like alpha wolves, and I think that's been like pretty much debunked. And so I just kind of am like, I don't really know if I love that development. I think it's fun to have a version of an infected person that's extra scary, that's like extra strong. If they could just, I just think from a writing perspective, Alex Garland, it's like, can you come up with something more interesting to call them than Alpha? Like, is there, there's choices that are made that I'm, and I'm sort of withholding judgment on the whole Jimmy of it all. On Jimmy's gang, I have to watch the next movie to know how I feel about Jimmy and his gang. It is very jarring the way that they come in at the end, but I'm not going to hold that against this film, because this film, for all intents and purposes, is wrapped up by the time Jimmy and his gang come in. They're just sort of a teaser for the next film. And this film in its own right works for the most part. So I give it an 8. I dock a couple points for just some of those little things, story-wise, script-wise, that I'm not sure about. Style, like design choices, I guess we would call them. And the way that they've decided to expand the lore, that I'm not sure how I feel about. The ending, what do you give the ending?
I'm giving the ending an 8 because mostly because of Ray Fiennes. Because, and then the acting, the acting from Jodie Comer, and I think his name is Alfie Williams. Is that his name? The Spike, I think. It completely unexpected. They went for a very like emotional ending. I mean, the climax really is just him accepting that his mom is going to be gone and accepting death, right? And then him kind of like climbing to the top and putting her skull on the top of this, bone temple, and very much completely out of expectation. But it worked. Like for me, I got emotional, like, wow, that was surprisingly effective, so I thought it worked really well. As I said, I actually really liked the Jimmy part just because it was so out of left field. So
I didn't dislike it.
Right.
Like I'm reserving judgment.
And I am with you there too. Let's reserve. We'll see how the next one is, but I liked it. I thought it actually worked.
I gave the ending of this film an 8 as well, because for the same reasons. I feel like the Ray Fiennes section, like once he shows up in the film, it's my favorite section of the movie. And I feel like everything that they want to execute from an emotional standpoint, it works really well as an ending to this story of this film, of this self-contained story that they're telling in this movie. I don't like, again, like there's just little things that get under my skin of like, will you kill Samson, please? And not knowing exactly what's going to go on with Jimmy and his gang and the way, but it still gets me going, hey, you got me in my seat for the next film. So for the most part, I think the ending of this movie works. There's just I dock a few points because of those little things, just nitpicky. And how about rewatchability?
Rewatchability, I did 7. I think it is a little, I really do want to rewatch this movie, especially now knowing what to expect and being able to kind of look for those, look for a little bit more, rewatch is always fun. So I definitely could rewatch it, but there are some tone shifts. There are some, seeing all those, the bigger alphas and their bigger parts is distracting. And it's also just like, this is also this is an extremely violent movie when it gets violent, and it's also that's kind of off-putting, like there's some times that it's just like but I mean it works for the movie, but I dock some points for that. So
rewatchability, you and me are in lockstep so far. I'm a 7 as well, where like this is not a franchise that I'm coming back to regularly. I'm not like, ooh, let me watch 28 Days Later again. Let me watch 28. I think every movie in this franchise has worked so far and is well constructed, but it's not things that I'm like, because it just like, I don't know. I like, to me, it's just not the thing that I want to come back to again and again. I will want to watch this movie again at some point and look for more details, especially knowing that they're building a new trilogy. I'll be interested in finding things that I maybe missed. But I don't think it's like super covered with Easter eggs and visual details. So yeah, I have it at a 7. How about cultural impact?
Cultural impact, I have it as a 7 as well. The critics love it, as I think it's like 89% on Rotten Tomatoes right now, but the audiences are a little. But I do think that, I mean, 28 Days Later is a huge cult, classic, and I think this fits in line with everything. We'll see how. I think it's a really great entry into this franchise. So it's hard to say right now, but 7 seems appropriate.
I think it's very easy to say that this is the second best film so far that they've made,
Yeah.
and in a franchise of 3 very strong films.
Yeah.
And yeah, I have it at a 7 as well, to show that this franchise still has staying power and that they're starting a new trilogy that's starting off on a really good foot, and that, like, if the next 2 are also well executed, then this will go down as like one of the stronger zombie movie, franchises to ever exist. So 7's where I've got it right now. That could potentially go higher. And your subjective score for this film?
My subjective score for this film is a 7.5. I think for some of the other reasons we talked about, I don't know if I could give it an 8, but I mean, this is a solid movie. And kind of like you said too, like, this isn't a franchise that I really am always going to want to revisit. But it's a great film from two great filmmakers, many great filmmakers, but Alex Garland and Danny Boyle, just always interesting to see what they come up with. And I love Danny Boyle's style. I love that he takes risks. Yeah. And he took a risk with this one, especially having a very emotional ending in a zombie movie. Like, it's so I really appreciated this movie.
Man, you and me we're locked in on our scores this week. I'm a 7.5 as well. We were the same all the way down the line. I really enjoyed this movie. I really enjoyed the emotional aspects of this movie. I enjoyed the performances in this movie. I enjoyed what Danny Boyle was doing in the editing room with this movie and with his cinematographer. And I enjoyed, for the most part, what Garland was doing with the script. There's just some of those design choices that I'm not sure how I feel about them. And overall, this is just a franchise that, like, it's not my favorite thing in the world, but it all works and it's all well executed. And for me, just subjectively, 7.5 feels right. What do you think out there? Did you see this movie? How do you feel? Do you agree with us? Do you disagree? Let us know in the comments. Up next, we will be watching F1 in theaters. So if you want to watch along with this podcast and you want to be in the know for our next episode, we are going to be watching Brad Pitt going fast in cars, going vroom vroom, and it's Top Gun Maverick but with cars.
Yes.
And here we go. So that'll be up next. Like, share, comment, subscribe, all the things. Let people know about the show, and we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.